Psychedelic Spotlight on behalf of PSYC Corporation does not in any way encourage or condone the use, purchase, sale, or transfer of any illegal substances, nor do we encourage or condone partaking in any unlawful activities. We support a harm reduction approach for the purpose of education and promoting individual and public safety. If you are choosing to use psychedelic substances, please do so responsibly.
Welcome to PSYC Taboo. I'm Mary Chicken Soup, and I'm here to take you on a wonderful tour of the world of psychedelics, sex, imagination, fun, creativity, and everything in between. So come with me on a journey to life.
Being curious is an incredibly beautiful state to be in. Psychedelics for me have helped open up the boundaries of my sexuality. And it's been a very rewarding experience.
Sex is psychedelic, it just is. And in my opinion, it's really the most godlike sacred thing that we can do. It's also a field where some of the deepest traumas present and it really requires a lot of consciousness. So when we're talking about the intersection of drugs, psychedelics, and sexuality, we need to be really, really careful and more careful than we should be already, which we're not careful enough.
The first time I ever tried psychedelics, I was probably 21 years old. I went on a camping trip to Joshua Tree with my then partner, and I ate what they call a hero's dose of mushrooms.
Joshua Tree is totally erotic, but you have to make sure to bring some kind of like cologne or something, because there can sometimes be a little funk that might mess with your flow. Just the smell of patchouli and hot ass.
And I stared at a fire for probably 3.5 hours and saw little fire dancing people everywhere and was just amazed that there was this life inside of something that I thought was really lifeless. And the beauty to see the joy and the spectacle and the mystery within mundane items.
Wait, did she say mundane?
I don't think so. Are you sure? What could she be talking about? Mundane things?
Not a couple of socks.
No, definitely not.
I think that the perception of opening yourself up to seeing those things can be a portal if you apply it to sexuality, of being able to find that joy in the things that you thought were mundane. They can actually be incredibly diverse and multifaceted within themselves.
One common experience with psychedelics is what we often call the re-enchantment of the world. So what you take for granted, what you see every day, suddenly it's full of mystery again. And your relationship to it becomes one of curiosity and celebration.
I am a type 1 diabetic, and I have been since I was age 7. It's a very difficult disease because it's invisible. It's a chronic disorder that I live with on a second-to-second, day-by-day, 24-hour-a-day, never turns off, never get a break, never take a vacation, there's no babysitters disease that is with me all the time. It is a disease that even though I look like I'm perfectly normal and everything is fine and I'm not suffering, there's no real physical traits of this disease. What's going on inside of me and the psychology of it and the rates of depression within this disease, specifically with women, are through the roof. Our self-worth, but also the worth of our own bodies and feeling like we're broken.
I do believe that when it comes to our sexuality and our sense of self-image and self-confidence, chronic health conditions can really get in the way. It affects our ability to feel comfortable, to achieve what we call that parasympathetic state in our nervous system, to have arousal, to have libido. And in some ways, maybe our sympathetic response that's responsible for orgasm becomes a little bit actually physiologically impacted by illness or injury.
Now, one thing I can tell you in this life is that pleasure is your God-given right. It does not matter if you are disabled, if you are suffering from a chronic illness, if you are suffering from an acute illness. Pleasure is your divine right.
So if you're someone who struggles with a disability and you want to be sexual, first off, I really recommend, and this might sound like something that's silly or like a no-brainer, but following influencers that look like you or share your experience and finding community or creating a community for yourself. So there's research in neuroscience that has found that when you have the friendships and community or the resources like this incredible book the Handy Book of Love, Lust, and Disability. When you have these resources that share your experience and you can feel comfortable talking with other people and feel validated in your experience, your gray matter in your brain expands. And when we have more gray matter, you can more effectively process your emotions.
Understanding my disease better, having autonomy over myself, and loving my own body gave me even more superpower into my sexuality. I had done psychedelics with my previous partner, but we never really engaged in sexual acts when we were on it. I think that we were always kind of taking these macro hero doses that were a little bit too much about like the journey you're going on than it was about like kind of being in that sweet spot of it having an influence and being with you, but you're still able to act physically on gestures and deeds that you want to perform.
Earlier, we were talking about set and setting. In addition to that, there's dose. And when it comes to sexual, sensual, erotic experiences with psychedelics, if you're doing heroic doses, I don't know what kind of experience you're gonna have, but probably not particularly sensual, sexual. And so lower doses definitely can put you in really extraordinary physical, sensual, sexual kinds of places.
The first true physical sexual experience that I had was with a partner that I had about 5 years ago, and it was New Year's Eve, and the plan for us was to take psychedelics, and my experience on it while being intimate with him was astounding. I watched myself bloom and open tremendously. As it progressed into a more beautiful entanglement, it felt like I was sifting into a universe of bliss. All of my senses were heightened, and it made it that much more beautiful and intimate.
Ultimately, what we're doing with sex and the ability to engage with sex in a way that grows us and enhances us means that we're in an open state, that we can meet someone in an open state, and our ability to do that in areas that we might be uncomfortable with, right? So whether it be oral sex, whether it be anal sex, whether it be any other type of sexual sort of experimentation, psychedelics are going to open up a space that essentially disconnects you a little bit from the ego and the insecurity that holds you back in the sexual domain. It allows you to sort of provide some distance to yourself and all your old stories that hold you back. It also allows you to connect in to the other person's space. It makes you more empathetic, more compassionate. It creates an ease of experience and allows you then to sort of get into areas that you may not have approached otherwise.
So I had tried anal sex with 2 partners previously and did so unsuccessfully. It wasn't until really recently that I met someone that I felt very, very comfortable with. We both felt comfortable enough to want to explore the things that we hadn't explored before with each other because we felt that safe. So we decided to make a jar of experiences, a list of experiences, write them down, put them in a jar, and then pick them out one by one. One of the first ones that we actually pulled out was mushrooms. I had had a lot more experience with mushrooms. He had only kind of like microdosed and a little bit more than microdosed. He had not had any sexual act on it as well. So we took the mushrooms the first time. It was a wonderful, beautiful sexual experience, given, just vanilla sex.
Whenever I think of vanilla, I think of like Mormons having sex in their ceremonial underwear. And then also Wonder Bread for some reason, like just imagining like a flaccid penis and like Wonder Bread, and it's just like.
There was no anal the first time, but we both felt so incredibly comfortable about where we were in that connection and where we were in our experience taking the psychedelics and how we felt, that the next item that we chose, which happened to be anal, which he had never done before as well, but I had attempted to do, but just again, wasn't with the right person that I felt comfortable with to do it with.
I would say that for somebody who's a naive psychedelic person who doesn't have a lot of their own psychoactive experiences yet, I wouldn't suggest that you just jump in with wanting to combine sex and drugs. And irrespective of what your experience set is, be sure that you are working with a mountain of consent. Now that's true with or without drugs, like a mountain of consent. Be in the conversation with your partner about boundaries, about likes and dislikes, about desires, about, you know, STDs. Like, talk about the things so that you don't make a mess afterwards. And I think that the mess is often in the lack of conversation that people are not having.
So when that item was chosen out of the jar, we both kind of looked at each other and were like, do you think we can mix too? Like, do you think that we should try anal on the mushrooms? And the way that we had felt on the mushrooms the night before really opened both of us up to a different level of intimacy. And so we felt that it would be applicable to add that to the experience of trying anal for the first time and allowing the psychedelics to really help bring down those levels of fear and the boundaries or the walls that we have up holding us back psychologically.
So a common misconception about anal sex is that you have to have one!
Yes! We're having it right now! And it's so affirming.
I could not have had a more positive, amazing experience of my life. It was incredibly pleasurable, which I did not think was possible. I had orgasms that were 5 times the ones that I was having. I didn't know that those levels were there. It was like a new level unlocked in a video game.
One of the biggest misconceptions about anal sex that I would say is that anal sex isn't romantic. It can actually be a really beautiful way to bond with a partner. Also, that when you're giving anal sex, and let's just say you don't have a penis, so you're wearing a dildo and you're doing what we call pegging, a lot of times people think if you're having anal sex in that way, the person who's pegging or on top isn't gonna also orgasm or have a good time or experience bodily pleasure. And that's also a really common misconception because you can have a great orgasm across many different areas of your body. Another misconception about anal sex is that it should always hurt or it will hurt. And if you're doing anal sex in a way that really prioritizes pleasure and has open communication, taking things slow, you maybe took a class on it, I highly recommend doing that. Anal sex isn't really supposed to hurt and it shouldn't hurt.
For me, sex is a transcendent experience. And if you can be truly present with your partner in the moment, present with the feelings that are and the sensations that are on your body, that are on your mind, and you exhale and you let go, I believe that sex can absolutely 100% be psychedelic.